NBA because a lot of discussion is always about would current NBA players be able to play in the NBA back in the 80s, back in the 90s? And then the same discussion, is had, can the players from the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, play in the 2020s of the NBA? So I'm going to discuss whether or not I think Shaq could play in today's NBA, and maybe we'll venture out into a few other players. The reason I am bringing up this topic is I saw an article, I just came across it, where Shaq said on the Pivot podcast, I believe, that he would average 50 in the NBA today. We know Shaq is one of the most dominant NBA players ever. Like, you could not stop him. Richard Jefferson had said, I think it was on JJ Redick's podcast when they were talking about Shaq. I don't remember how that came up, but we were talking about Shaq or whatever. And he said, you used to have two roster spots for centers who wouldn't necessarily get playing time because they wouldn't make the rotation, except you needed them to just foul Shaq. Because you couldn't have your starting center get in foul trouble, obviously, because you needed them out there. So they would literally have centers on the roster just to foul Shaq. Like, that is how dominant he was. And so I say all that to say, because with every era, things change. Like, style play, the pace, obviously the three-point shot is a big thing nowadays. Everything changes, and so it's really hard to say someone could or couldn't play in a certain era, because my ultimate thing is like a player, whoever it is, especially if they're a really, really good player, they will adapt, right? Like, whatever way they have to adapt, they'll adapt, because there's a reason that they got that good to begin with. Like, players are adaptable, so that's one thing I'll say. To Shaq directly, though, I absolutely agree that Shaq would dominate in today's NBA. I don't even think that's a question. And the reason is because Shaq is not going to shoot threes, right? Like, he's not going to do that. And so, while he may not have that advantage that some other centers have, and that may be a separate issue, having Shaq, having to guard some of these guys on the perimeter, like Jokic, who's a really, really good three-point shooter, right? So that's a whole nother separate issue. But again, players are adaptable, so I don't really want to get into that. I'm just talking about the offensive side of the ball. I absolutely believe Shaq would dominate in today's NBA because he was dominating back in, the early 2000s, the 1990s, late 1990s, stuff like that. Like, you don't become that dominant and then it doesn't translate in today's NBA. Like, there are certain skills and abilities that will translate in every era. Like, Steph Curry's three-point shot, I know some people will say, the rules were different back then and whatever, but like, whenever, when the three-point shot was invented, if Steph Curry could shoot the way he shoots, right, regardless, he would get his shot off. His release is super quick. He's always moving without the ball. Like, he would find a way, to get his shot off, regardless of the different rules and stuff like that. So similarly, I think Shaq's dominance would absolutely transfer to today's NBA. Not only because, again, we know he's one of the most dominant players ever, and that doesn't change just because of an era, like his skill set and stuff like that. But in addition, because of the, complaint over the lack of ability to foul someone hard, that's the whole argument, like, you can barely touch somebody and it's a foul nowadays and stuff like that, right? So people were hard fouling Shaq and they probably weren't calling some of them, right? Because the only way to stop Shaq was to foul him. Imagine how many flagrant fouls there would be on Shaq today, right? And although Shaq was not the best free throw shooter, so that would definitely, be something that would be kind of like 50%, like one miss, one make. But at the same time, if he's getting 5 more free throws a game than he was prior, you know, in the previous era when he was playing, that's still 5 more free throws or 5 more, you know, chances at the line. That's 10 potential points. So if he's making half of them, that's already 5 more points per game, right? So in that aspect, I definitely agree. He would definitely be more, you know, just as dominant. He said he would average 50. I don't think he would average 50 only because I don't think the league wants anybody to average 50. It's not because I don't think Shaq could. I just think the league wouldn't want someone to average 50 because then they would be literally so overly dominant. It would be difficult, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain what I mean. It has nothing to do with Shaq. I just feel like the league would find that a little bit of an issue if Shaq is literally averaging 50, because how are you going to officiate him? Like, it would just be really tough. So, someone says, you're kind of making sense low-key. Thank you, I appreciate that. So I do think Shaq would dominate. I think Shaq could easily average like 35 though, because Shea is averaging, or he averaged 32, right? Like something like that. So Shaq could easily average 35, maybe 40. Again, like I don't know how far the league would, I know that's a tricky thing to say. Like I'm not saying the league can control how many points Shaq scores. I'm just saying like, I don't know if, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying not to get myself in trouble here. But the point is, I do think Shaq would completely dominate. I think it would be impossible to guard him. Impossible, because the other issue is that, you know, it's kind of like coming back in a way, the center position, but it kind of went away for a while because everyone's playing small ball and stuff like that. And so there are, you know, tall players and, you know, whatever, but like I said, Richard Jefferson said there were players on the roster just to foul Shaq. Like, just to foul Shaq. Literally, that was their job. So, the fact that teams don't have that on their roster necessarily anymore because teams want actual depth. Like, they want players so they can go 10, 11 deep because that's kind of where the league is right now. So, if you don't have anybody like that to foul Shaq, and you don't have anybody to guard Shaq to begin with, because that's kind of impossible anyway, then teams are really going to be in trouble. Like, I feel like it's a catch-22 for other teams to have to guard Shaq. Like, you're going to flagrant foul him. He had good footwork. Like, you're not going to stop him. He's going to do a putback dunk. He's relentless. Like, he's going to do all the things, and he's going to dominate. So I absolutely agree with Shaq that he would dominate in today's game. Like I said, average 35, maybe 40. And it would be, the goal would be every game, how do we game plan against Shaq? Or maybe it's how do we game plan against everybody else on his team and then just hope for the best against Shaq. Someone said Shaq is like 56. I don't mean now. I mean, like, if Shaq was in today's era and he was in his prime. Obviously, I'm not saying Shaq, you know, being 56, being in the NBA. I'm saying Shaq being in the NBA in this era, in his prime, and having all the skills and all the stuff he did, you know, just basically moving him 20 years, so to speak. That's what I'm saying. So I definitely agree Shaq would dominate. And then, like I said, I feel like this applies to other players, especially players who are great. Like, even players who weren't great, like I said, I feel like people just adapt to their environment. And if some of those players back then grew up in this era, they would have grown up playing different styles, just like players who play today. If they grew up back then, they would play a different style of basketball. Like, it all changes everything. But if we're just saying take their current skill set and what they have currently, I feel like a lot of the great players would still be like great today. Like their skills would still transfer because, again, when you're that great, your skills are usually transferable to every era because that's part of what makes you great. Like Michael Jordan, I mean, obvious answer, but he would dominate today's game as well. Like, that's not that's not really a question to me. Like, I feel like Hakeem Olajuwon would also dominate in today's game as well. Also very good footwork, you know, obviously a dominant center, 2 championships, and just a really, really, really good player. And we can go down the line with players over the years. Like, I just feel like the conversation gets a little silly sometimes, even though I'm having the conversation here with you guys. But I do feel like the conversation gets kind of silly when people are arguing like, that player couldn't play in that era and that player couldn't play in that era. And granted, I've never played in the NBA, so I don't know what it was like to play against Magic Johnson and Kareem. I don't know what it was like to play against Jordan and Scottie Pippen. I don't know what it was like to play against Shaq and Allen Iverson and all of them. I don't know what it's like to play against LeBron and Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. I don't know. I'm not there. But what I'm saying is, from watching the game, Kevin Durant's another one too. Like, because he literally can score over anybody because he's like 7 feet tall. He's like 6'11", even though, again, I've said this once before. He says he's 6'9". None of us believe him. No offense, Kevin. But whether he's 6'9" or 6'11", doesn't really matter because he can get a shot off anytime, anywhere. He's Mr. Efficiency. If he's wide open, he's making it every single time. And making baskets is something that transfers to every era. Like, it doesn't matter. And because, again, he's like 6'11", you know, talking about Kevin Durant, even though, again, I said we kind of strayed away from centers a bit in this era and stuff like that, even if you say, well, everybody had a 7-footer on that team, you know, back in the day or whatever, one, they probably can't guard Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant's 7 feet with, like, a guard skill set, so to speak, right? So, like, that's a tall task to ask for some of those centers to guard. But also, even if they were able to guard him or whatever, he can just shoot over them because he's that tall. So what I'm saying is, like, I just feel like great players will transfer their skills and adapt because they are great for that reason. Someone said, I love your NBA talk. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're enjoying this live stream. Yeah, I really just wanted to get on here and talk about, you know, Shaq saying he could dominate in this era because I absolutely agree with him. And thank you guys so much for joining this live. I hope you enjoyed this live stream and see you next time. Bye.